Hello, my name is Jasmine Lee, and I am not your mama's astrologer. I also am getting over a head cold, so if I sound tinny, I don't know what word I would use for how I sound. Disgusting. Please excuse that. But it is a new week. No matter what's going on in our bodies, no matter what's going on in our psyches, no matter what's going on inside of ourselves, time is a construct that doesn't afford us much slowing down. In that, it's always moving. In that, everything we choose to do with it produces something else. And in that, time can be extremely powerful. Time can also be a construct. Time can also be something we use as a boundary. I've been thinking about time a lot because when Uranus over the weekend moved into Gemini, that's always a really big shift when a big slow-moving planet, so it has been a 7-year cycle, as I said last week, moves into a new sign. The energy shifts in a way that you can't always quantify because of its bigness, because of its its quality, its nature of just being here. And in order to just be here, everything will always change over time. Sometimes ugly things turn into beautiful things. Sometimes beautiful things turn into old bitch things, like us humans. And our relationship to time is a way to clock, you like my pun, how we are doing. So to me, this Monday is really a take stock day. What if you could control time? What parts of your life would you want to slow down? What parts of your life would you want to speed up? And the astrology of this week is very relationship, love, and beauty intensive. In that, that's not always a gateway to happiness. It's not always a gateway to anything other than right back where you started. Relationships are a good vibe check. You are a good vibe check. How you're relating to other people is a good vibe check. And with this homework being about time, how do you measure relationships? And what I want you to do is think of a relationship that you don't have anymore, that used to be really important to you. And I want you to try to get to the marrow of what felt important about that relationship. How did it move you? How did it change you? How did it make you better? How did it make you worse? And I want you to take those qualities and then, just like clay, I want you to fold them in your hands and use time to mold them. And how over time did that relationship change? How over time did you mold yourself into something that didn't fit in with that energy anymore? And what did you do about it? How did it end? Was it you? Was it them? Was it time? Was it space? There's all kinds of reasons relationship ends. I can always pull that one person up in my mind that isn't in my life anymore. And sometimes it can be hard because there's a story around not only that person, but around the times that we had, but around the situation that led to us not being in each other's life anymore. And there's so much time clay dried on to that this week, being very Venus intensive, is going to ask us to chip away the layer of clay we have put over the endings of things, to really get down to the bottom of why time does this, of how we grow. And sometimes growth can be hard. It can be edgy. It can be shitty. But sometimes even the edgiest, shittiest growth edge, relationship end, new relationship beginning, can be something you could have never imagined, because now I use this loss as a tool that whenever it flares, I use it to try to understand my attachment, my pain body, And I bring all of it up because Venus is Venusing this week. And we get to have a deep dive into connection. And I really see connection and time as the same thing, because the more time that goes by, the more we can mold our story into something that becomes an untruth, into a blame, into a victim story, into a hurt story that can grow stagnant and stale. And that sometimes, this time, maybe it is time to hang it up. So, on Tuesday, Venus is going to be sextiling Pluto. So you have a day to think about this. Today's Monday. You can think about it. Tuesday with Venus sextiling Pluto, it's asking for transformation. So I ask you to do this homework today, this thought process around your relationship body, around the process of you relating to others. And I want you to think about how you've moved and changed, not only in the relationships that aren't around you anymore, but in the relationships you're currently in. How are they all going? Venus is making a positive aspect to Pluto, which means in a positive way, our relationships are ready for some transformation. How we are relating is ready to shift and move. And sometimes we can leave the glue stick cap off for too long and we can get dry. That clay, it dries. Our skin, as we age, bitch, dries. Yes, it does. And so what do we do about that? I mean, other than moisturize, we take stock of where the mistakes are. We chip away and we recreate. Because Venus isn't just about relationships. It's art, it's beauty, it's poetry. It is about our sensual self. It is about our glorious side that chooses love and not war. It is its opposite, being Mars. It is the peaceful anti-warrior. And when there's so much Venus stuff going on in a week, I always think that it is a time to take stock on your relationships, both past, present, and future, and not to dwell on them, not to crush them, but rather to take stock of them, to count them and to mirror them and to understand them better, especially the ones that went wrong, especially that decisive moment where you said that thing, sent that text, walked away that time, that in a manner of being now, in hindsight, because it's always 2020, you can see why you did that. Or maybe you can't, and that's an even deeper dive of the why of our hearts, the why of our love. And with Venus making a positive aspect to Pluto, it's saying you can transform. You don't always have to love in the same way. You know that book, Love Languages, the 5 love languages or whatever, continues to make all of these predestined needs, wants, desires that never change. But I would like to argue that maybe our love languages over time can change as we mature and understand that we don't have to be shown love in only the way that we want love. That in order to be love, we have to appreciate it in all of its forms. We have to not be looking for what we need from the other in relationship, but rather be fulfilling that need so that we can more truly understand the relationship dynamic between each other. If you're always in relationship searching for someone to fulfill a need that is lacking inside of you, then in nature, that person is always going to be lacking because no one can actually fill the insides of us. No one can actually beat your heart or breathe in your air. They can give you a good shoulder rub, and that's pretty dope. They can provide company. They can time bend with you. But no one person can fill what needs filling. Only you can do that. And I like the contrast of relationships being really heady this week because our relationships truly are us. Because the relationships we let go is our growth. Good, bad, ugly. Because the decisions we make within relationships are really the decisions we're making about our own self-worth and what we are tolerating and what we are willing to stay for, what we are willing to fight for, and what we are willing to leave for. Which is why this homework is important, because thinking about a relationship that used to be very important that is no longer in your cosmos helps you to understand what you needed to grow through in the act of losing someone important. Wednesday, Venus then squares the nodes of fate. So trust that whoever is showing up for a reason, and whoever is leaving is also leaving for a reason. I think the human mechanism to grab, that when you have something in your hand and another person goes to grab it out, our first mechanism is to squeeze tighter, is to not let go. And we do this as a survival mechanism, but we've transmuted that at the same time into a syndrome of attachment, into a notion that I can't lose because losing is too painful. And I agree. I feel as though I've been through a lot of loss in my life, both through relationship and also through death, and also through many other avenues of time bending and moving and shifting in a way that I couldn't quite hold on to the things that I was wanting to hold on to. And in that way, that jerking motion of something being pulled out of my hand, pulled out of your hand, can leave lasting side effects. And that's really what this astrology is about this week, is our lasting side effects of how we used to be relating that now need an upgrade. And I love that as I'm saying this, the sun is rising and the lighting's getting busted on this here video. But it's showing a different side. It's highlighting what is obvious and casting shadows around what isn't. And the more light we shine on one thing, the more shadow work we'll need to do. Friday, Venus is going to sextile, same as Pluto, a good aspect to Saturn. So who's in the mix right now? We've got Pluto, transformation. We've got the nodes of fate, where we're headed. And we've got Saturn, our lesson keeper. And methinks there's going to be an opportunity here to finally learn. And that's what I feel I've been searching for in relationships I've lost, is the deeper meaning around why they got lost in the first place, and how time has either healed it or molded it into a monster that lives under my bed. And that's what this week really feels like it's about. It's about calling out those monsters, those relationship proclamations, the ways and the stories in which we told our whys are coming up and out to be transferred, transformed into a different relationship altogether. And how do you feel about that? How would you feel about not being a victim anymore? How would you feel about letting it go? How would you feel about finally letting that person go so that they can be happy, so that you can be happy, so that the process of a broken heart can transmute into the process of a fuller, more open one? And then Friday, with right after Venus is sextiling Saturn, we have a full moon in Scorpio. No basic bitches allowed, because Scorpio is the 8th house, and the 8th house is the monsters under our bed. It is shared resources. It is sexuality. It is trauma. It is pain. It is death. It is rebirth. It is authenticity, at least. And at most, it is soul change, soul growth. But oftentimes it represents through loss, or through fear, or through relating in toxic ways. And how did you used to relate in toxic ways? How are you still relating to the world in toxic ways? Where are you the problem? Where is the toxicity inside of you? Because every single person has toxic traits. And as you are doing this homework of thinking about someone who isn't in your life anymore and how time has shaped that, I also want you to think about your own toxic traits and how you move through that, how you try to develop something from that trait that doesn't have to be protective anymore, that isn't trying to protect you, but trying to move you rather. Sometimes protection can look like stagnation because protection is the sunny side of fear. That when we're protecting ourselves, it's really because we're deeply and profoundly afraid of what it could highlight, show, and expose inside of ourselves. It's a very exposing time. The world is changing in a very scary and exposing way, and we're all going to be developing our own defense mechanisms, our own clay walls that we've molded and stitched and fired in our soul kilns, and now we think is stable, strong, and going to protect us. But as we all know, a toss to the floor can shatter any built up residue of the clay walls we think we have, because they are a figment of our imaginations, these protections. And when we realize that, that's when we let the light in. That's when we let the growth in. That's when we say, yeah, do not recklessly go into the dangerous night, but also pack for it. Bring a goddamn flashlight. If you're gonna go soul digging, bring a pickaxe. Don't just use your fingernails to get bloody. Use your tools. Use your intuition. Use your fortitude. Understand that anything that is here to hurt you is also here to move you. That's what Pluto says. Pluto will always say, I will make you do the hard thing so that you will see that beautiful humans, you can do hard things. And that in fact, when you process and accomplish the hard things, you become the highest level version of yourself. And to me, this week, it starts in and continues and ends in relationship. And that there's so much to learn from all of that right now. And then during this full moon, we also have Mercury, our thoughts, ending its time in Aries and touching Chiron, which is our original wound. So ouch, 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 ouch. What comes up when we do the homework I've asked you to do is ouch. I think of my lost relationships, and sometimes it hurts so palpably. Sometimes grief can take one's breath away. But I also know that my thoughts are powerful, that how I think about that loss can change everything for me. And then the next day on Saturday, Mercury moves into Taurus. So we're starting to get some planets moving out of all this fiery Aries energy and moving into this restructured, grounded, Venusian Taurus energy. And so you can see that there's really a story going on this week about who we are in relationship to other, or I dare argue, in relationship to the world, to time, and to our psyche. And if you have a toxic relationship to yourself, then we set ourselves up. You, me, all of us, we set ourselves up to get hurt by choosing to protect ourselves from getting hurt. That it is the grasping with our hand that is the thing that's hurting us, and that it's the letting go that exonerates us. And so we end where we started. And time, they say, is the great healer. But time is also, I invite you to know, the great storyteller. That over time, a story can be told in so many ways, so many iterations of Cinderella, so many notions of how these stories start, begin, middle, and end. They change over time, and so does your story. Because what you decide about your story is what becomes your story. And so whether there's even truth in it or not is neither here nor there to the plot that you have developed inside of yourself. And if you do not start understanding that it is a hero's quest and not one of victimhood or not one to enslave you, it becomes one to exonerate you. That over time, we're going to make mistakes, that over time, we're going to get into toxic relationships, that over time, we're going to get into beautiful relationships that end and we miss them. And we cry sometimes for the missing. But would you have not done that choice? Would you have not made that connection? Knowing what you know now, maybe you can say to yourself, yeah, I would have avoided that. But I think that's where the work is. If when you think about that relationship, you think, I wish I had never, well then you're taking away a sovereign part of yourself that says, I wish I wasn't me right in this moment. Because anything that's happened to you in the past has shaped that soul clay into who you are now. And just as I said, clay can shatter. And to use it to protect ourselves is a silly thing. We can also use it for a time. And as it crumbles and as it disintegrates and as it gets fired again and again and again, the process of us becomes art. And that's what Venus says to us, is that there is no relationship that you've had or will have that can't become art if you believe it to be so. If you understand that even the darkest of relationships, that even the most abusive or hardest of ones, we're here to be embraced. We're here to help you grow. We're here to help you hurt. We're here to help you find your own boundary over time. And that while time is the great healer, it is also the great manipulator too. And Mercury at the end of the week, moving into Taurus, helps us see things with less fire and more earth. They want you to see your pain or your hurt story or the victim quality of the things that have happened to you as seeds that you can plant different this time, because you can water differently as a result of that relationship. That if it's important enough that that was the one you thought about when I brought this up during this podcast, then it is one that can grow you for the better, I promise. But it does take fortitude, and it does take a lot of patience with self, and it does take allowing that pain body to get activated. But in so doing, this full moon in Scorpio can transmute a lot of pain. It can wash away a lot of residue. And healing is always here for us, especially when there's so much going on in the astrology. We just have to choose it. And the card that I pulled is Message in a Bottle. I like that card because to me, our pain is a message. Our thoughts are messengers. Mercury rules our thoughts, and our thoughts are messengers. And what we are communicating and sending out to the world, to the people around us, is what comes back around and either sets us free or enslaves us. So watch your words this week. Watch your process this week. Watch your thoughts this week and see where they lead you. And understand that while time may indeed be a construct, it is also a tool to create fables around who we think we are and where we're going. And I much prefer to consider myself the hero. Why not? We all are in our own stories. But you don't get to be the hero if you don't do the work. And if you don't allow time, if you don't allow relationships, if you don't allow circumstance to change you. Because boy, are we in a time of change. Thank you so much for listening. My one request always is that you share me with one friend, because I have this idea in my head as we're going into a Venus week, as we're thinking about relationships, that if I get shared with your closest person and that closest person shares me with their closest person, then all of a sudden there is this closest person network of humans that love each other, that surround a process or a podcast as it were. And that's how success truly grows, is through and from love, caring, and effort. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week.